My name is Emily Dawson. I'm 33 years old and I work as a senior accountant in Denver, Colorado. The night my brother threw wine at me started with a velvet gift box placed right in front of my dinner plate like I was the guest of honor. My mother smiled too brightly. My father folded his hands like this was some serious family ritual. My brother leaned back in his chair with the kind of confidence people only have when they think they've already won. I opened the box, expecting something sentimental. Maybe an old photo, maybe jewelry, maybe one of those fake peace offerings families make when they want to pretend the past never happened. Instead, I found a debt packet, $452,000, loan statements, overdue notices, legal warnings, all under my brother's name. Then he looked me dead in the eye and said, "You have to pay this." I actually thought he was joking for a second. I laughed once. Nobody else did. My mother said I was the only one in the family stable enough to fix it. My father said I had the money and that refusing would make me responsible for whatever happened next. When I said no, everything changed in less than 10 seconds. My brother grabbed his wine glass and flung it straight into my face. Red wine went into my eyes, down my neck, across my sweater. My mother shot to her feet and screamed, "Get out of my house if you won't help this family." I stood there dripping, shaking, humiliated, and suddenly very, very clear. I walked out without another word. But 30 minutes later, a man stepped into that living room with documents in his hand, and the entire house went silent. Before I tell you who that man was, and why my family's confidence collapsed the second he opened his briefcase, tell me something first. What time is it where you are right now? And where are you watching from? I always love seeing how far these stories travel. A week earlier, I had been kneeling on my living room floor, packing for a Thanksgiving hiking trip near Estes Park when my phone lit up with a text from my mother. "Come home for dinner this year. We miss you." That was it. No heart emoji, no follow-up, no warmth beyond the bare minimum. Just enough to stir up the old part of me that still wanted to believe maybe finally something had changed. I had lived in Denver for almost 8 years by then. I owned a 2-bedroom condo near Wash Park, had no debt except a manageable mortgage, maxed out my retirement accounts, and had built the kind of life people call boring when they've never had to save themselves. I called it peace. I liked knowing my bills were paid, my kitchen was quiet, and nobody could turn off my lights, shame me for succeeding, or borrow from me the way my family always seemed to want to. Growing up, I had been the responsible daughter in a family that treated responsibility like a renewable resource. If I got straight A's, that was expected. If my brother barely passed something after making a mess of it first, that was a triumph worth celebrating. I learned early that my role wasn't to be loved loudly. My role was to be dependable, useful, forgiving, quiet. My brother Ryan was 31 and had spent most of his adult life chasing flashy shortcuts dressed up as ambition. Real estate flips, crypto trading, sports betting, consulting gigs, side hustles with big promises, and blurry math. Every few months, there was a new story, a new plan, a new reason. He just needed one more chance. My parents always described him as misunderstood, visionary, a risk-taker. Meanwhile, my caution, discipline, and long work hours were treated like personality defects until somebody needed them. My best friend Nora told me not to go the second I read her my mother's text. "Emily, they don't miss you," she said. "They miss access to you." It stung because I knew there was truth in it. Still, some stupid old ache in me wanted one decent holiday memory. I wanted one dinner where nobody measured my worth against how useful I could be. So, I led my hiking trip, unpacked my boots, bought a bottle of wine for my father, a silk scarf for my mother, and a cookbook for my sister-in-law, Brooke. I even spent extra time choosing a sweater that felt soft and polished but not showy because some part of me was still trying to walk that impossible line between successful enough to be respectable and not so successful that they resented me for it. My parents lived in Colorado Springs, just over an hour from me if traffic behaved. The whole drive down I kept old holidays in my head. Ryan monopolizing every room. My mother laughing too hard at his stories. My father praising him for ideas that never went anywhere. Me doing dishes in the kitchen while conversations drifted around me like I was a background appliance. But there had been good moments once, too. Or maybe not good. Maybe just less bad. My grandfather, Walter, slipping me an extra slice of pie and asking real questions about my work. My mother hugging me in the doorway before guests arrived when no audience was there to influence her. Tiny scraps of affection that had kept me coming back longer than I should have. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked picture perfect. Warm yellow light in the windows. A wreath on the front door. My father's SUV parked out front. Ryan's black truck was there, too. I sat in my car for a full minute with my hand still on the wheel, letting dread and hope fight it out in my chest. Then I grabbed the gift bags and went inside. The welcome was almost too warm. My mother, Linda, hugged me first and held on a little longer than usual. My father, Mark, took the wine bottle like I'd brought proof of devotion. Ryan clapped me on the shoulder and called me our Denver success story, which immediately made me suspicious because he never praised anyone without a reason. Brooke kissed the air near my cheek and thanked me for the cookbook before even looking inside the bag. My grandfather sat in his usual armchair near the fireplace, quiet, watchful, giving me a nod that somehow felt more genuine than everyone else's words combined. Dinner smelled incredible. Turkey, rosemary potatoes, green beans, warm rolls. It should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt staged, like every laugh had been rehearsed before I arrived. Within 10 minutes, the question started. My mother asked how much property values had risen in my neighborhood. My father asked whether my bonus structure had changed this year. Ryan asked if I was still heavy in index funds. Brooke asked too casually whether I had kept most of my savings liquid or diversified into bonds. I remember setting down my fork and thinking, this is not normal. This is not curiosity. This is inventory. Every time I tried to redirect the conversation, hiking, work, Denver traffic, literally anything, they nudged it back toward money. My mother mentioned how hard things had been for everyone. My father joked that I was the only one who still understands numbers. Ryan kept smiling, but it wasn't warmth. It was tension in a handsome mask. Then Brooke mentioned that sometimes the strongest family member had to step up when life blindsided someone else. My stomach dropped. I looked toward my grandfather. He wasn't eating. He was just watching. Not confused, not relaxed, watching. That was the moment I knew the dinner wasn't the event. It was the setup. And whatever came next had been planned long before I walked through that door. After dinner, my mother suggested we move into the living room for dessert. And a little family surprise. That phrase alone should have sent me straight back to my car. Instead, I let myself be guided onto the sofa while my father poured fresh glasses of Cabernet, and Ryan paced once near the fireplace like he was trying to rehearse courage. Brooke sat beside him, too composed, too alert. My grandfather remained in his chair, hands folded over his cane, saying nothing. My mother brought out a small velvet box and placed it in my lap with a smile so forced it looked painful. "Open it," she said. I peeled back the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside was a stack of folded documents clipped together. The first page had Ryan's full name on it. The next page had the number $452,000. I stared at it, blinking hard because my brain refused to process it. $452,000 wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a rough month. It wasn't a temporary setback. It was a crater. "What is this?" I asked. No one answered right away. Then Ryan exhaled sharply and said, "It's debt. Temporary debt. I need help getting ahead of it before things spiral." I looked down again. There were multiple creditors, legal notices, default language, interest rates that looked predatory even from a distance. "What did you do?" I asked. Ryan gave a dismissive shrug that tried and failed to look confident. "A couple ventures went sideways. Ning." Brooke jumped in immediately and some bridge financing turned ugly. My father leaned forward. "The specifics aren't the point." I looked at him. "The specifics are absolutely the point." My mother stepped in with the gentle voice she used when trying to address manipulation as concern. "Emily, sweetheart, we all know you've done very well. Ryan hit a bad stretch. Families help each other through bad stretches." There it was. Not a request, a framing device, a moral trap. I set the papers back in the box. How much are you asking me for? Silence. Ryan said, all of it. I laughed once out of pure disbelief. You're asking me to hand over $452,000. My father's jaw tightened. You have the assets. That sentence made me go cold. I turned slowly toward Brooke. She worked in private banking, mid-level, but with enough access to know what was where. If she was willing to cross lines, she should never cross. She didn't blink. You had no right, I said quietly. She lifted one shoulder. I knew enough to understand you could solve this. You checked my accounts. Her expression hardened. I checked what I needed to check when I realized this family was in danger. I remember the exact feeling that hit me then. Not just anger, but violation. Years of saying no to impulse purchases. Years of skipping luxuries, years of long hours during quarter close, tax reconciliations, audits, promotions, careful investing. And now they were treating my discipline like an unlocked vault. They had every right to enter. Ryan leaned toward me. Emily, listen to me. If this doesn't get cleaned up now, things get ugly fast. You know I can recover if I get breathing room. Recover from what? I snapped. What exactly did you do? His face darkened. I told you deals went bad. That's not an answer. My father's voice sharpened. Stop cross-examining him and start acting like a sister. My mother reached for my wrist. Please don't make this harder than it already is. I pulled my hand away. Harder. You invited me here under false pretenses. You sat me down after dinner and put your son's debt in a gift box. Ryan stood up then, pacing, agitated. Why do you always act like you're above everyone? He said, it's just money. That sentence, it's just money, is the kind of thing only people say when they've never had to earn enough of it to feel safe. I stood up, too. No, it's years of my life. It's security. It's choices. It's the reason I never have to beg anyone for anything. And I am not handing it over because you blew up your own life. Brooke's voice turned sharp and venomous. You have more than enough. Keeping it while he drowns is cruel. I looked at her. No. What's cruel is illegally accessing someone's financial information and helping plan an ambush over holiday dinner. My father stood so abruptly his glass trembled in his hand. Do not accuse her in my house. Then maybe don't let crimes happen in your house, I said. The room froze. Ryan's face changed first. He stopped pretending this was about family and let the fury show. You are so damn selfish, he said. You'd rather watch me get destroyed than part with money you're hoarding like some paranoid miser. I'd rather watch you face consequences than fund your delusions. I shot back. My mother gasped like I'd hit him. Emily, she cried. Enough. No, I said louder now. Actually, not enough. I am so tired of being brought in only when one of you needs a bailout. I am tired of being called cold because I have boundaries. I am tired of Ryan failing upward while all of you act like my role in this family is to absorb the damage. Ryan took 2 fast steps toward me. You owe this family, he said. For what? I asked. For being the only one who got lucky. That was the moment everything snapped. He grabbed his wine glass from the side table and held it, not dropped it, not splashed it in a moment of chaos. Threw it. The red wine hit my face and chest with enough force to sting. Cold liquid ran into my eyes, soaked through my sweater, dripped from my chin onto the rug. For 1 second, nobody moved. I could hear my own breathing too loud in my head. Ryan's chest was heaving. My father did nothing. Brooke looked stunned for a beat, then angry at me somehow, as if my refusal had caused the assault. And my mother. My mother looked at me, not him, and screamed, "Get out!" I wiped at my eyes in disbelief. You're throwing me out because he assaulted me. If you won't help your brother, she shouted, voice shaking. Then yes, get out of my house. Something inside me went still. Not broken. Still. I looked at each of them in turn. My father refusing eye contact. Brooke rigid with self-righteousness. Ryan flushed and wild. My mother furious that the plan had failed. Not that I'd been humiliated. Then I looked at my grandfather. Walter met my gaze and in his face I saw it. Not surprise, but shame. Not for me, for them. I set the empty velvet box on the coffee table. You don't get another dollar, another favor, or another lie from me, I said. My voice was calmer than I felt. Not now. Not ever. Ryan muttered. Good. We don't need you. But his hands were shaking. I grabbed my coat, though I never put it on. I walked to the door with red wine drying sticky on my neck, the smell of it turning my stomach. No one stopped me. Not one of them. I stepped outside into the freezing Colorado night and kept walking until the air hit my wet clothes hard enough to make me shiver. I got in my car, locked the doors, and sat there gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles hurt. Have you ever had a moment when betrayal felt so complete it actually made you calm? Because that was me. Not crying, not screaming. Just done. I started the engine, backed out of the driveway, and drove away while the house behind me still glowed with holiday lights. Like it hadn't just shown me exactly what love in that family had always been. Conditional, strategic, and for sale. I had made it about 25 minutes north on I-25 when my phone started buzzing in the cup holder. First my mother, then Ryan, then Brooke, then my father. I ignored every call. A minute later, a text came through from my grandfather. Pull over when it's safe. Do not answer anyone else. I need to tell you what just happened. I took the next exit and parked beneath the lights of a gas station. Hands still trembling, sweater tacky and cold against my skin. When I called him, he didn't waste time. Emily, Walter said, his voice low and steady. I'm sorry. I should have stopped it sooner. I swallowed hard. What happened after I left? He exhaled. 30 minutes after you walked out, Charles Mercer came in. Charles Mercer was the family attorney. He had handled my grandparents' estate planning for years, but he almost never came to anything social. Why was he there? I asked. Because I asked him to come, Walter said. I suspected Ryan was lying, and I had already asked Charles to bring documents if tonight confirmed it. Then he told me the part that made the title of that night burn permanently into my memory. The moment Charles walked into the living room carrying a leather briefcase, the room had gone silent. My mother apparently stood up first, confused. My father asked what he was doing there. Ryan tried to act casual. Charles didn't sit. He opened the briefcase, took out a folder, and said, "Before anyone says another word about Miss Dawson's money, the family needs to understand the liability exposure they are already in." According to Walter, Ryan went pale immediately. Charles laid out the truth in front of all of them. The $452,000 was not from a failed business venture. It wasn't even primarily from one thing. It was a chain of disasters. Over $200,000 from sports betting and online gambling accounts routed through shell apps. Nearly $90,000 from margin calls on reckless leveraged crypto positions. A leased Escalade, a luxury watch purchase, a failed condo flip, private travel, cash advances, high-interest personal notes. And worst of all, several creditor filings already included language that suggested misrepresentation and possible fraud. Ryan had not hit a bad stretch. Ryan had built a bonfire and assumed someone else would stand in it for him. That's not all, Walter said. Brooke used her position to access your banking profile. Charles had already spoken to a compliance contact because I told him I believed they were planning to pressure you. Once you walked out and Ryan admitted in front of everyone that they expected you to pay because they knew what you had, there was nothing left to deny. I closed my eyes. So they knew. Oh, they knew, Walter said. Charles asked Brooke directly whether she had accessed non-permitted information. She didn't answer. She just started crying. Your father tried to turn it around and say the family was in crisis. Charles told him a crisis didn't excuse privacy violations or coercion. Then Walter told me the part that stunned me most. Before dinner, he had already amended his trust documents. He'd been watching Ryan spiral for over a year and had become convinced my parents were enabling him while treating me like a reserve account. The moment he heard them demand that I pay, he instructed Charles to execute the amendment immediately. Ryan was removed as successor co-trustee. My parents were removed as fiduciary backups. Any discretionary support Walter might have extended to Ryan was frozen. Any future estate distribution to my parents would be limited and structured, And I, the daughter they had literally thrown out with wine on her face, had been named sole neutral executive if Walter died. "I didn't do it to reward you," he said gently. "I did it because you are the only person in this family who tells the truth when it costs you something." I cried then, but quietly, one hand covering my mouth so the sound wouldn't leave me. Not because money mattered more than betrayal, because for the first time that entire night, someone had seen exactly what had happened and refused to rename it. Walter kept going. Charles had also informed Brooke that her bank's internal legal and ethics unit had been notified of a possible unauthorized client data access event. She apparently went white as paper. My father exploded, accused Charles of humiliating the family, and demanded everyone calm down. Charles told him there was no version of calm where extortion at a holiday dinner became acceptable. Ryan tried to argue that since we were related, it wasn't theft if I chose to help. Charles replied, "She already chose not to. Anything after that becomes pressure. Pressure plus private financial data plus a coordinated demand is a very different conversation." Snorts. According to Walter, nobody spoke for several seconds after that. That was the silence from my hook. The real one, the one that falls when arrogant people realize the room has turned from stage to courtroom. Walter said my mother started crying first, then Brooke, then Ryan began blaming everyone else, and my father tried to salvage authority he no longer had. But the illusion was gone. They hadn't cornered me. They had exposed themselves. A minute later, Walter sent me photos of the documents Charles had shown them. Screenshots, creditor notices, trust amendment signature lines, a typed memo summarizing possible policy breach. I stared at my phone in that gas station parking lot with wine drying on my skin and felt something painful but clarifying take shape inside me. They hadn't just wanted my money. They had counted on my guilt, on my conditioning, on the version of me that would rather lose everything than be called selfish. And that version of me was dead. Walter asked if I was safe. I told him yes. He asked if I wanted him to contact the police about the wine incident. I thought about it for a long second. "Not tonight," I said, "but I want everything documented." "It will be," he said. "And Emily?" "Yeah. Do not go back for an apology. They're not sorry you were hurt. They're sorry the plan failed." I hung up, snorts, changed into an old sweatshirt from my hiking bag in the backseat, and drove home to Denver in silence. Every mile put distance between me and the house, but the real distance came from knowledge. That night, I stopped wondering whether I had overreacted. I stopped wondering if maybe I'd been too harsh. I stopped negotiating with the idea of family like it was a sacred word that could erase facts. By the time I got home, I had already decided 3 things. I would lock down every account I had. I would retain counsel before they contacted me again. And I would never again walk into a room with those people unprepared. The fallout started the next morning. By 9 o'clock, I had dozens of missed calls and messages. Ryan swung between panic and blame, saying I was ruining his life by refusing to help. My mother kept talking about family loyalty. My father tried to frame the whole thing as a private matter that had gotten out of hand. Brooke sent one stiff email asking me not to misrepresent what had happened with my financial information. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I locked down every account, changed passwords, moved funds, and hired an attorney in Denver who specialized in financial coercion and privacy misuse. She immediately sent cease and desist letters and requested preservation of any access logs tied to Brooke's review of my banking profile. For the first time in my life, I stopped explaining and started documenting. Over the next few weeks, their situation unraveled fast. Brooke was placed on administrative leave while her bank investigated unauthorized account access. Ryan's creditors became aggressive, and one lender moved to accelerate repayment. My parents, who had quietly tied themselves to some of his obligations, suddenly realized they were exposed, too. Once my grandfather froze any discretionary support, the illusion collapsed. By January, they had listed their house. Ryan and Brooke's marriage didn't survive much longer after that. The stress, the lies, and the public embarrassment tore through whatever was left between them, and she eventually filed for divorce. My father lost face with relatives and friends. My mother stopped getting invited to the same social gatherings she had once cared so much about. The only call I answered was from my mother a few months later. She, snorts, didn't apologize for the wine, the setup, or the demand. She just said I had made my point. That was all I needed to hear. I told her the same thing. I finally understood myself. Ryan being my brother explained the connection, but it did not excuse the behavior. After that, I stopped waiting for any real accountability. Ryan eventually left Colorado for a smaller, rougher life somewhere out of state. My parents moved into a condo far smaller than the house they had tried so hard to protect. Their world did explode all at once. It simply shrank. And for the first time, mine didn't. What came next was quieter than revenge stories usually are, but it mattered more than any dramatic confrontation ever could. A few months later, I earned a promotion I had spent years working toward. For the first time, success no longer felt dangerous. It no longer felt like something my family would notice, measure, and try to convert into leverage. It felt like mine. I had built it carefully, patiently, and without shortcuts. And now I finally got to enjoy it without wondering who would come asking for a piece of it next. I also started therapy, not because I was falling apart, but because I didn't want to rebuild myself around bitterness. I wanted to understand why I had tolerated so much for so long and why guilt had always seemed louder than my own instincts. Therapy gave me language for things I had normalized for years. Guilt conditioning, role assignment, financial pressure disguised as love, and the way toxic families train one person to become the emotional and practical backup plan for everyone else. Once I could name those patterns, I stopped treating them like fate. I stopped asking myself why I couldn't just be nicer and started asking why I had been expected to carry what was never mine in the first place. I started hiking again, too. And that first solo trip after Thanksgiving felt like a reset. Out in the cold mountain air, far from missed calls and manipulation, I realized peace wasn't loneliness. It was safety. It was the feeling of spending a full day in my own company without bracing for impact. That mattered more than I can explain. Around the same time, I started recording anonymous reflections online about boundaries, money, and being the responsible child in a toxic family. I never used names, but I told the truth closely enough that strangers began writing back. Their stories sounded painfully familiar. Siblings demanding bailouts, parents weaponizing guilt, years of love turning conditional the second money entered the room. Reading those messages made me realize my story wasn't unusual. It was just one version of a pattern a lot of people live through in silence. My grandfather remained the only family member I stayed close to. He never pushed forgiveness, never carried guilt on anyone else's behalf, and never once suggested I owed reconciliation just because we shared blood. He simply showed up honestly. And that honesty became more healing than any apology I never got. By the end of the year, I had paid extra on my mortgage, traveled again, renovated my kitchen, and built routines that belonged entirely to me. That was the real shift. Healing stopped being about what happened to them. It became about what no longer had access to me. My money, my peace, my time, and the part of me that used to feel responsible for saving people determined to stay lost. A little over a year later, I received a copy of the final trust papers my grandfather had signed after Thanksgiving, along with a handwritten note folded inside. What mattered most to me wasn't the legal language or the financial structure. It was one sentence in his note. Families reveal themselves in who they think they can sacrifice. I read that line more than once because it named the truth more cleanly than anyone else ever had. That was exactly what had happened. My family hadn't loved me less by accident. They had simply decided over and over again that I was the safer person to burden, the easier person to disappoint, the one most likely to absorb the damage and still come back. By then, Ryan's collapse was complete. His bankruptcy became final. Brooke's divorce was done, and even my parents had started keeping their distance from him because he had become too expensive, too chaotic, and too embarrassing to defend. That irony was impossible to miss. They hadn't drawn a moral line when he demanded my money, lied about his debt, and threw wine in my face. They drew one only when his destruction finally started costing them too much. In the end, even the son they had protected at all costs became a burden they no longer wanted to carry. That didn't make me feel triumphant the way some people might expect. It just confirmed something I had already learned the hard way. People who excuse harm for long enough eventually get harmed by what they protect. Sometimes people imagine revenge as one dramatic moment, one speech, one public humiliation, one perfect ending where the villain finally understands everything. But that wasn't really my story. Yes, there was the wine. Yes, there was the silence when the truth came out. Yes, there was satisfaction in watching the people who tried to corner me lose control of the narrative. But the deepest revenge was quieter than that. Brooke lost the job she risked to violate my privacy. Ryan lost the lifestyle he thought somebody else would keep funding forever. My parents lost the home and reputation they had valued more than fairness. And I kept the one thing they had all tried to reach into and claim my future. That in the end was the answer. Real revenge wasn't screaming back, begging to be understood, or fighting to win inside a system designed to use me. It was refusing to be the family's emergency fund, scapegoat, and backup plan ever again. It was choosing not to explain myself one more time to people committed to misunderstanding me. It was building a life that stayed whole after they were shut out of it. And maybe the hardest truth of all was this. Blood is not permission. Love is not a debt. And anyone who only values you when you are useful does not get to call you selfish when you finally protect yourself. So if your own family demanded that you sacrifice everything to save the person who keeps destroying their own life, would you say no the first time, or would you keep giving until there was nothing left of you to protect? And when the dust settled, who do you think truly lost the most? The daughter who walked away with her dignity, or the family who traded theirs for one more chance to save the wrong?